On a rainy October day in 1849, a figure was found collapsed outside a Baltimore tavern, delirious, muddied, and dressed in shabby clothes that didn't appear to be his own. Passers-by were stunned to realize the man in the gutter was none other than Edgar Allan Poe, the famed author of eerie tales and poems. He was quickly taken to Washington College Hospital for treatment, but in the 4 days leading up to his death on October 7th, Poe never fully regained consciousness. Instead, he drifted in and out of delirium, reportedly plagued by vivid hallucinations. The night before he died, according to his attending physician, Dr. John Moran, Poe even cried out repeatedly for someone named Reynolds, a mysterious reference that's unexplained. Early that Sunday morning, Edgar Allan Poe died at age 40. The official cause recorded as phrenitis, or swelling of the brain, a vague diagnosis used at the time. In his death, he would create a mystery as perplexing and macabre as one of his own stories. Poe's final journey began with high hopes. He spent the summer of 1849 in Richmond, Virginia, pursuing a new literary venture while recovering from a serious illness. While there, he rekindled a romance with an old sweetheart and planned to remarry, looking toward a brighter future. On September 27th, 1849, Poe departed Richmond, intending to travel north via Baltimore to Philadelphia and then to New York. Yet somewhere along this route, Edgar Allan Poe vanished. He never arrived in Philadelphia, nor did he reach New York as planned. For nearly a week, the writer's whereabouts were completely unknown. It wasn't until October 3rd that he resurfaced in the worst possible state. That day, Poe was found slumped near a polling station in Baltimore, incoherent and in distress. This sudden reappearance, with Poe in dire condition and far off course from his intended journey, only deepened the mystery surrounding his final days. Poe spent his remaining hours confined at the hospital, largely alone and delirious. He was kept in a section reserved for patients found intoxicated, and no visitors were allowed to see him. The only witness to his last moments was Dr. John Moran. He described Poe as slipping in and out of consciousness, rambling in complete delirium. The doctor claimed that Poe's final words were a soft plea for God to help my poor soul, uttered in the early hours of October 7th. However, Moran's credibility has since come under scrutiny. Throughout the years, Moran told inconsistent versions of Poe's last days, leading many to doubt his testimony. With all medical records now lost to history, separating fact from fiction in Poe's final hours is impossible. Despite being well known in his own time, Poe's funeral was a brief and sparsely attended affair. Only a few family members and close friends braved the damp, chilly weather to see him laid to rest. In the aftermath, Poe's reputation suffered almost as much as his body did in his final days. A hostile obituary written by his rival Rufus Griswold maligned Poe as a drunken, depraved madman with numerous false or exaggerated claims. Published under a pseudonym, this libelous piece was widely read and, for a time, accepted as truth. It helped cement the image of Poe dying in disgrace due to alcoholism, a strong stigma at the time that would cling to his legacy for years. Meanwhile, the real cause of Poe's death remained uncertain, and it soon became the subject of intense speculation. For decades, many assumed that Poe simply drank himself to death, as was commonly stated in the media of the time. Poe's collapse and delirium were easily attributed to alcohol by his contemporaries, and his story was used as a case study in alcoholic degeneracy by the temperance movement. Over time, however, the alcohol theory has been widely challenged. Poe did struggle with drinking, but he wasn't the habitual drunk that many imagined. Friends noted that Poe had a severe sensitivity to alcohol. Even one glass of wine could leave him staggering, and that he often abstained for months at a time. In fact, Poe was a member of the Sons of Temperance, and by all accounts stayed sober during his final period in Richmond. Thus, while Poe had periods of excess in his life, modern experts doubt that alcohol alone can account for the peculiar circumstances of his death. That said, it does remain a serious possibility, as he could have relapsed into a severe binge episode. One of the most enduring and bizarre theories is that Poe was the victim of a violent election scam known as cooping. In 19th century Baltimore, gangs would kidnap unsuspecting individuals, force them to drink, and then disguise them to vote multiple times under different names. Such voter fraud was rampant in Baltimore at the time, and tellingly, Poe was found on Election Day outside a polling site notorious for cooping activity. The cooping theory neatly explains several oddities of Poe's case, such as why he was discovered in an incoherent state and why he was wearing clothes that didn't belong to him. However, others have noted that Poe was a well-known and distinctive-looking figure, and no one reported seeing him brought to any polling stations. Despite some skepticism, cooping remains one of the most plausible explanations for Poe's untimely fate. Cooping isn't the only foul play scenario that has been suggested, though the others are rather straightforward accounts of him being beat up and robbed by random thugs or goons. Apart from external foul play, a host of medical explanations have been proposed for Poe's baffling end. Over the years, scholars and doctors have retroactively diagnosed Poe with a litany of ailments, including heart disease, diabetes, epilepsy, meningitis, cholera, syphilis, and more. Among the more prominent theories is rabies. In 1996, a medical study of Poe's symptoms concluded that he exhibited classic signs of rabies infection. However, the major problem with this theory is that there's no evidence whatsoever to indicate that he was bit by a rabid animal. Contemporary physicians were familiar with the concept of rabies, and as an interesting aside, it's actually one of the first medical conditions ever documented. In ancient Samaria, a portion of a text was discovered, which warned people that dog bites can spread a fatal disease, but only under certain rare and unusual conditions. Other diagnoses focus on more ordinary illnesses. One hypothesis suggests Poe succumbed to influenza that developed into deadly pneumonia. He had been ill before leaving Richmond and was caught in cold, rainy weather in Baltimore, factors which could have led to a severe fever and delirium. Perhaps the most eerie theory involves a brain tumor. When Poe's body was exhumed in 1875 to be moved to a new grave, witnesses noted a strange calcified mass inside his skull. More than 170 years later, the truth behind Edgar Allan Poe's death still remains elusive, with no single theory proving definitive. In the end, the man who redefined mystery and horror left behind a legacy that no amount of sleuthing is able to crack. Norman Prater was 16 years old when he went missing from his East Dallas neighborhood in January 1973. He was last seen around midnight at an all-night coffee shop where his mother worked, telling her he was heading home. His mom saw Norman with two friends and an older man she didn't recognize shortly before he left. When Norman never arrived home, his family reported him missing on January 14, 1973. The disappearance launched a police investigation, but with no solid leads, it soon went cold. Authorities suspected he might have been abducted or met with foul play, given the mysterious circumstances. For his loved ones, the sudden disappearance was devastating and left them with decades of uncertainty. 6 months later, and 350 miles away, a grim discovery was made. On July 9, 1973, The body of a young white male was found on the side of Highway 35 near Rockport, Texas. He had apparently been the victim of a hit and run days earlier. The boy was wearing a straw hat, a white t-shirt, white Levi's jeans, and a distinctive braided blue and red belt, but nothing about his clothing or description led to an identification. Despite extensive efforts by local authorities and media to identify the teenager, including publishing his description in newspapers, no one came forward to claim him. The unidentified boy was estimated to be 15 to 20 years old, around Norman's age. At the time, investigators didn't connect this incident to Norman's case. The Rockport John Doe remained nameless for decades, his true identity a mystery in parallel with Norman. Norman's disappearance eventually became the oldest unsolved missing person case in Dallas police records. His family spent years hoping for answers, never knowing whether he was alive or dead. In the absence of evidence, various theories emerged. One theory even claimed that Norman had fallen prey to Dean Corll, the infamous Candyman serial predator who targeted teenage boys in Texas, but no proof ever supported that idea. Meanwhile, the unidentified Rockport case also lingered without anything in the way of meaningful development. Authorities would occasionally revisit the John Doe file, hoping some new clue or missing person report might finally give the young man a name. Yet for more than 5 decades, both Norman Prater's fate and the Rockport boy's identity remained unknown. A crucial breakthrough came at the end of 2025, and surprisingly, this wasn't due to genetic genealogy. The Aransas County medical examiner, while reviewing old evidence, discovered a clear post-mortem photograph of the 1973 Rockport crash victim in the file. This was an image that had never been widely circulated outside of the local police. That photo was forwarded to the Dallas Police Department's Missing Persons Unit, along with a number of other police departments. Detective Ryan Dalby in Dallas reviewed the image and was struck by how much the unidentified teen resembled the long-missing Norman Prater. Dalby sought a second opinion from a Texas Rangers forensic analyst, who agreed the likeness was strong. Notably, no genetic evidence had ever been logged, meaning that it would have to be old-fashioned detective work that broke the case. Armed with this lead, Detective Dalby located Norman's older brother, Isaac Prater. When Dalby first contacted Isaac about the possible match, the brother said he had been waiting 52 years for a call like this. In late 2025, Dalby met with Isaac in person and showed him the unearthed photo of the unknown victim. Isaac immediately recognized his brother, pointing out familiar facial scars, including one from a dog bite on Norman's lip, and confirmed the match. After 52 years of uncertainty, the pieces finally fell into place, and Dallas police officially concluded that the unidentified teen was Prater, solving 2 cases at once. Norman's identification has also reopened the 1973 hit-and-run investigation in Aransas County. The driver who struck him was never found, so that aspect of the case remains unsolved to this day. It also remains a mystery how a teenager from Dallas ended up nearly 400 miles from home. Investigators suspect he may have hitchhiked south during those missing months, as many young people did in that era. Unfortunately, the exact circumstances of his journey and death may never be fully known, though the investigation remains ongoing. Hey everyone, just a quick reminder to check out the YouTube membership or the Patreon if you want to take your support to the next level. Now with that said, let's get down to business, since there's a lot more mysteries to cover. On a sunny afternoon in 1991, spectators at a hydroplane race on Lake Simcoe were stunned when a large creature suddenly surfaced near a stalled boat, only to slip back under the waves. Many believe this was a rare glimpse of Igopogo, the legendary lake monster rumored to lurk in the depths of Lake Simcoe. This cryptid of Canadian folklore is reputed to dwell in Lake Simcoe, about 40 miles north of Toronto in Ontario, the country's largest province by population. The name itself echoes the much more famous Ogopogo, a lake monster said to inhabit Lake Okanagan. Locals have given the beast other nicknames as well. For example, people around Kempenfelt Bay call it Kempenfelt Kelly, while those in Beaverton know it as Beaverton Bessie. The city of Barrie, on Kempenfelt Bay, even installed a large sea serpent sculpture on its waterfront in 2016 to honor the legend. If you're familiar with my channel, you'll know that this means the creature satisfies my law of lake monsters. Tales of mysterious water creatures in Lake Simcoe actually predate the Ogopogo name by hundreds of years. Some indigenous legends spoke of a fearsome water spirit in these waters, and early European settlers also reported strange creatures here. In 1823, for instance, a settler named David Soules claimed to see a huge, long animal thrashing about near the shore. This early account helped set the stage for Ogopogo's reputation in local lore. More reports of an unusual lake creature have surfaced sporadically over the years, with the mid to late 20th century being particularly rich in sightings. In 1952, near Georgina Island, 4 people, including First Nations Chief Wellington Charles, saw something bizarre in the water. Charles described a beast with a neck like a stovepipe and a dog-like face, startling features to encounter in a lake. Another prominent report came on July 22, 1963, when witnesses observed a dark, snake-like creature, up to 60 or 70 feet long, sporting several fins along its back. This 1963 incident reinforced the idea that something unexplained was lurking below Lake Simcoe's surface. A photograph of Ogopogo, allegedly taken in 1975, shows 2 dark humps in Lake Simcoe. This blurry image, published by a local newspaper in 1976, is often cited as evidence of the monster. And if you're just listening, this is the image of the creature I've had up for this entire segment, so you may want to take a look and see what you think of it. In June 1983, a sonar operator detected a massive moving object with a long neck underwater, though some argued it was just a false reading from a school of fish. The most famous evidence is a videotape from 1991. During a boat race that summer, an amateur video captured a large animal rising out of Lake Simcoe. A zoologist who reviewed the footage estimated the creature to be about 9 to 12 feet long with flipper-like limbs. The video, which is now lost media, raised the creature's profile considerably, even if the video itself was never made widely available. Eyewitness descriptions of Ogopogo have varied widely, and essentially no 2 reports are exactly alike. However, unlike the classic Loch Ness-type plesiosaur image, Ogopogo's brownish-gray coloration and canine-shaped head give it a distinctly mammalian appearance. These features have led some to speculate that the cryptid might be an unknown aquatic mammal, an aquatic canine of sorts. And this description of a watery dog has naturally led scientists and skeptics to lean toward more down-to-earth explanations. Lake Simcoe is connected via waterways to the Great Lakes, so some have speculated a stray seal could have swam in using that connection. However, cryptozoologists have pointed out that seals only end up in the Great Lakes accidentally, and this would be a massive journey for such an animal. The mystery of Ogopogo has inspired a few earnest investigations. In 2005, investigators, backed by a Discovery Channel science show and Barrie's tourism department, scanned Kempenfelt Bay with sonar and underwater cameras. This attempt found no signs whatsoever of any unknown creature lurking in the bay. In the 1980s, a cryptozoologist had also scoured the lake with similar results, leading him to suspect that the animal may have died off or just moved on. Lack of hard evidence notwithstanding, the Ogopogo legend persists to this day. Some hold out hope that an undiscovered creature truly lurks beneath Lake Simcoe's waves, hiding in the depths. On a chilly Christmas night in 2007, the area outside of Phoenix, Arizona Mall played host to an unfathomable act of cruelty. A man was seen engulfed in flames outside a Subway restaurant as horrified bystanders rushed to call 911. That man was 36-year-old Aaron Taylor, a familiar homeless figure in the area who had just become the victim of a gruesome and senseless crime. Investigators are convinced they know who's responsible, but a lack of hard evidence and the silence of witnesses have kept the perpetrators out of the reach of justice. Aaron Taylor wasn't an anonymous drifter to those who worked near Paradise Valley Mall in Phoenix. Employees at the mall's eateries and shops knew him as a polite, friendly presence who often camped near the Subway restaurant on East Cactus Road. Aaron had come to Arizona from Oregon years earlier, and by all accounts was a gentle, considerate person who had a rough lot in life. Tragically, Aaron's final months were marked by torment. He had become the target of a group of local young men who took pleasure in bullying him as he tried to go about his life. Witnesses later told police that a trio of teens and young adults had been harassing Aaron for weeks before his death. These individuals lived in a nearby apartment complex, and they treated Aaron as a source of cruel entertainment. In the latter half of 2007, people saw Aaron being subjected to degrading quote-unquote pranks. In one instance, the criminals reportedly duct-taped Aaron to a bench in the mall courtyard, leaving him restrained and humiliated. On another occasion, they dragged him and threw him into a fountain for their amusement. A mall security guard even recalled seeing these men pouring liquids on Aaron and pushing him around in the months before the slaying. It was a pattern that grew increasingly violent over time, escalating with little intervention from bystanders or authorities. In Aaron's case, this pattern was a dire warning sign of the horror to come. While the harassment was known and widely witnessed, there was no sustained effort that successfully stopped the assaults. On the evening of December 25, 2007, while many families celebrated in warmth, Aaron Taylor settled in to sleep on his usual bench. It was a holiday evening like many others for him, cold and quiet, with a few passers-by and the glow of neon from nearby shops. Sometime that night, the same group who had been tormenting him decided to pay Aaron a visit. According to witness accounts pieced together later, 3 males approached Aaron in the courtyard as he rested. They brought drinks and snacks, perhaps trying to pretend they were in the Christmas spirit, or perhaps simply to toy with him. Several people saw the group chatting and sharing drinks with Aaron, almost as if they were hanging out casually. In fact, police would later find an assortment of items left behind: a half-empty bottle of whiskey, an unopened can of beer, and even a bag of Cheetos. It seemed the men were socializing with Aaron at first, perhaps lulling him into a sense of security. It turned out that this was just the setup for something unthinkably cruel. As darkness fell, what had appeared to be a quote-unquote friendly encounter turned into one of the most disturbing acts I've ever covered on this channel. Witnesses reported a horrifying sight. The young men began flicking lit matches at Aaron's long beard. When this sick game stopped being entertaining, they took things one step further. They doused Aaron in some sort of flammable liquid. Around 7 that night, a bystander saw flames erupting from the bench area and called 911 in alarm. In a matter of moments, Aaron was completely engulfed in fire. The attackers scattered, reportedly running off back toward their apartment, leaving Aaron to his horrific fate. The scene was nothing short of a nightmare. Mall security and a nearby convenience store clerk sprinted over and desperately tried to save Aaron, using their jackets to smother the flames that were consuming him. These good Samaritans fought frantically for several minutes, but the fire was too intense due to the flammable liquid Aaron had been doused with. When Phoenix Fire Department paramedics arrived, they found a harrowing sight: Aaron's body straddling the bench, still on fire. First responders extinguished the flames and rushed to perform CPR. They raced Aaron to the Maricopa County burn unit, but the injuries were catastrophic. He was officially pronounced dead shortly after arrival at the hospital. Later, the medical examiner's report confirmed the most chilling detail. Aaron had been alive throughout most of the ordeal, evidenced by soot in his airways from breathing in the smoke and flames. Aaron had been lit on fire and been forced to endure unimaginable horrors while fully conscious, for the amusement of 3 disturbed individuals who remain free. In the immediate aftermath, Phoenix police launched a full investigation, but they faced serious challenges from the start. The very act of attempting to save Aaron's life unfortunately destroyed much of the physical evidence at the scene. Firefighters had no choice but to douse the flames with water and foam, which inadvertently washed away potential forensic clues. Any traces like accelerant residue, blood, or fingerprints that might have been on Aaron's clothing or the bench were largely obliterated in the process of extinguishing the fire. Notably, while they recovered evidence, most of these items had been compromised by a mixture of heat, water, and foam. For instance, matchsticks that may have been used to ignite Aaron were too fire damaged to yield any DNA or fingerprints. Investigators scoured the area for surveillance footage, but frustratingly, none of the nearby shop's security cameras captured the secluded spot where it happened. The crime had effectively occurred in a blind spot with little forensic evidence. Eyewitness testimony became the crucial pillar of the investigation, since the physical evidence was lacking. And indeed, multiple people had seen parts of the incident or the events leading up to it. Several witnesses told police about the group of young men seen hanging around Aaron that night, providing descriptions of their actions. One witness specifically reported seeing the men laughing and flicking matches at Aaron shortly before the fire erupted. In the aftermath, someone came forward saying that one of the young men actually bragged afterward about the incident. All of these accounts painted a consistent and damning picture pointing to the same perpetrators. Crucially, people also noted that these were the same individuals who had been harassing Aaron for weeks prior. In the eyes of the Phoenix police, there was little mystery about who committed this sick act. The pattern of escalating attacks and eyewitness placements all pointed to those 3 young men as the culprits. While the police may have identified the likely perpetrators early on, turning that suspicion into an arrest proved daunting. A huge obstacle was the lack of cooperative witnesses willing to testify in court. Some bystanders who initially spoke to police grew hesitant to get further involved. It's been speculated that there may have been witness intimidation involved. When detectives brought in the 3 suspects for questioning, they hit a wall of silence. All 3 denied involvement, and as soon as police started pressing them with the witness accounts, the suspects lawyered up. According to the cops, the suspects' parents moved quickly to hire attorneys for their sons and advised them not to cooperate with investigators. With no confessions, no surveillance footage, no DNA, and only reluctant witnesses, the case stalled out. Prosecutors determined there just wasn't enough admissible evidence to confidently charge the suspects, even though the detectives strongly believed they had the right people. The prosecution only has one chance to pursue the case, so the idea that they would have taken it to trial without cooperative witnesses made the chances of success minimal. Also, of course, the lack of any usable forensic evidence posed a huge problem, especially since the witnesses stopped cooperating. The biggest mystery here isn't who did it, but rather how to finally hold the culprits accountable. Over the years, Phoenix detectives have revisited the case multiple times, hoping new evidence might surface, but as yet nothing has. In the end, it appears that the best chance for justice for Aaron Taylor will be if one of the men involved in the attack turns on the other two. Another potential possibility is if some very significantly degraded DNA can be reanalyzed to form a DNA profile. Even if only one individual can be tied to the crime, that's likely all that's needed. Using this method, the authorities may be able to put the full weight of the state on one individual and fully crack the case. Making a deal with one of the men may simply be the only way to realistically bring the other two to justice. Anyway, this case makes me absolutely sick. Hopefully these guys are caught and Aaron gets the justice he deserves. If you'd stepped into a refined English drawing room in 1800, you'd likely have encountered a sight that seemed to defy the very laws of biological physics. Hanging prominently within a heavy, gilded frame, a creature that was supposedly a pig or sheep or a cow didn't look like a living animal at all, but rather like a breathing brick of meat. Its body was rendered as a perfect rectangle, a sharp-edged block of muscle and fat so massive that the four spindly legs supporting it looked as if they might snap at any moment. These oat-stuffed animals weren't the result of an artistic blunder or a painter who'd never visited a farm. Instead, they were carefully constructed status symbols, the visual manifestos of an agricultural revolution that was reshaping the British landscape. This era of rectangular livestock painting was a profound display of power, wealth, and a radical new way of conceptualizing the natural world as something to be engineered for profit. Also, if you're one of those people who tends to just listen to my videos, there's a lot of interesting art from the time period here that you're going to want to see. The late 18th and early 19th centuries were a period of frantic change for Britain. As the Industrial Revolution shifted into high gear, the population of urban centers exploded, and all those factory workers needed a reliable source of food. This created a massive, lucrative market for meat, milk, and tallow. In response, a new class of landowner emerged, known as the improvers. These weren't traditional farmers who were content with the methods of their ancestors. They were scientific tinkerers who viewed livestock as biological machines that could be refined for maximum output. They believed that through rigorous intervention and selective breeding, they could create animals that grew faster and fatter than anything nature had originally intended. To these men, a perfectly square cow was tangible proof that they'd mastered the science of breeding and had successfully bent the biological world to their will. This obsession with size was framed as much more than just a way to generate wealth. It was presented to the public as a profound patriotic duty. With the nation frequently engaged in costly conflicts and the domestic population rising, food security was a major political concern. Elite farmers argued that by developing these gargantuan meat mountains, they were providing a vital service to the entire country. They claimed that their experiments in creating massive cattle would eventually trickle down to smaller, more modest farmers. This in turn would lead to a more productive agricultural system that would benefit everyone from the monarchy to the common laborer. Some animals were even given names like Patriot to emphasize this connection between a farmer's breeding success and his devotion to the British crown. When an artist captured a cow as a perfect rectangle, they were painting a portrait of a national hero, a fleshy pillar of British prosperity and industrial progress. There was a very cold, calculated economic reason for the preference for such extreme fatness. In a world before electric lights and modern synthetic lubricants, animal fat, specifically tallow, was a critical industrial resource. It was used to produce the candles that lit every home and provided the essential grease for the heavy machinery that powered the nation's factories. It's estimated that the fat from a single prize-winning animal could sometimes be worth significantly more than the meat itself. Breeders were incentivized to produce animals that could pack on as much fat as possible, and the rectangular shape was considered the most efficient container for that weight. A square silhouette signaled that the animal was carrying the maximum amount of high-value tallow along its back and sides. The geometry was a visual code for the financial value of truly industrial livestock. The most famous figure in this era of agricultural spectacle was undoubtedly the Durham ox. Born in 1796 and bred by the Colling brothers, this bull became a genuine national celebrity. Eventually purchased by a traveling showman named John Day, the ox was taken on an epic tour across England and Scotland that lasted for 5 years. Day even had a custom-made carriage built to move the massive animal, which was reported to weigh nearly 3,000 pounds. Everywhere they went, crowds of people paid for the privilege of seeing this monstrous creature in person. The ox's image was reproduced in thousands of prints and engravings, which were sold as souvenirs. These images were so popular that they were even used as patterns for dinner plates. This in turn allowed families to literally eat their meals off the likeness of the greatest representative of the world's most famous beef producer. Not to be outdone, the Craven heifer became another legendary figure in the early 1800s. Born in 1807 on a grand estate in Yorkshire, she was fed relentlessly until she reached record-breaking proportions. She remains the largest cow ever shown in England, weighing over 4,000 pounds. Like the Durham ox, she was taken on tour, a journey that was so slow and difficult, it took 73 days just to travel from Wakefield to London. She was so wide that her owners had to build a special doorway for her cowshed that was twice the normal size just so she could get in and out. These celebrity animals were subjected to a strange life of extreme pampering, mixed with the grueling physical strain of constant travel and public exhibition. The artists who created these iconic paintings were often provincial or itinerant specialists who moved from one grand estate to another. These artists who were commissioned to put these meat castles to canvas weren't looking for the approval of high-minded art critics in London or Paris. They were working for practical-minded landowners who wanted an accurate, if idealized, record of their achievements. These painters were effectively creating trophies that their owners could hang on their walls to announce their success to any visitor. The influence of these images wasn't confined to the walls of manor houses. Thanks to new printing technologies, the images of celebrity animals entered the homes of the growing middle class. Pottery manufacturers began producing vast quantities of dinnerware featuring these livestock portraits. Owning a platter with the image of a famous meat rectangle was a way for a family to show that they were modern, patriotic, and aligned with the ideals of progress. The dining table became a place where status was displayed not just by the food being served, but by the very dishes it was served on. This mass distribution helped to cement the rectangular aesthetic as a defining visual symbol of the era, making the square cow a recognizable icon across the entire country. But unfortunately, there's a very dark side to this pursuit of geometric perfection that was often overlooked in the celebratory atmosphere of the time. The extreme selective breeding and intensive feeding required to create these massive animals took a devastating toll on their health. These so-called improved creatures were often so heavy that they could barely move, their delicate legs struggling under the weight of bodies that had been engineered for sheer volume. The short lifespans of animals like the Durham ox and the Craven heifer were a direct result of the physiological strain their bodies were put under. For the breeders, these were the necessary sacrifices in the name of progress and national food security. The paintings capture a moment of triumph for biological engineering, but they also record a period of profound suffering that was justified by the economic needs of the time. As the 19th century wore on, The fashion for rectangular livestock began to fade. The science of agriculture became more refined, and breeders started to prioritize traits like efficiency and meat quality over sheer visible bulk. At the same time, the art world moved toward a more naturalistic style, and the portraits of itinerant painters were replaced by more realistic depictions of rural life.